Hello and welcome. My name is Kent Trammell, and this is the first in a series of tutorials covering the creation of a realistic 3D portrait in Blender 2.6. I'll be creating a base mesh, sculpting detail, painting textures, growing and styling hair, shading and lighting, and compositing a final image. In this first part, I'll be creating a base mesh from a foundational sculpt followed by a retopology. Since this is a 3-hour modeling session, the playback has been sped up. So I'll get started by loading a few reference images. You'll probably recognize these two actors, but this portrait won't be a direct rendition of either. Instead, my goal is to combine real-world reference and artistic freedom to achieve a unique individual. Also, I tend to favor a sculpt-centric workflow. I find that it allows me to quickly rough out a shape and form without having to worry about traditional box modeling, which I find clumsy. Here the head will start as a subdivided cube with a section at the bottom extruded for the neck. I remove half the head and add a mirror modifier. The next step is to add a little resolution to the mouth, nose, and eye area in preparation for sculpting. Now it's time to sculpt, so I'll add a multi-resolution modifier. I increase the levels slowly as I go. Often the temptation is strong to jump up several layers for detailing a specific area, then jumping back down, and jumping back and forth throughout the course of the sculpt. However, by making sure you take time on each level to detail as much as possible over the whole mesh before leveling up, you'll find your final sculpt much smoother, free of both ridges and artifacts. And really the only brushes I'll be using are Grab, which is green, Draw and Crease are red, Inflate and Pinch are white, Flatten and Polish are yellow, and Smooth, which is also white. Grab and Draw are great for shaping larger facial structures like the cheeks, bones, and brow and eye sockets. Crease, Inflate, and Pinch work well for finer features like the lips, nostrils, eyelids, and eventually wrinkles. Flatten and Polish are useful for planing the surface away and sometimes smoothing what the smooth brush won't smooth, like geometry poles. So here I'm trying to get an idea for the overall structure of the face. And a bonus in Blender that's lacking in ZBrush and Maya and 3ds Max, for example, is the ability to sculpt on a multi-resolution platform and then immediately jump into an edit mode and perform typical mesh operations. Blender's integrated so well with both sculpt and editing meshes that I can quickly scale down the face because it was too big. In these first stages, it's important to be very free and orbit around the mesh frequently to address all areas of the face. Try to avoid getting hung up on a specific area and detailing it to the max without addressing the other areas of the face. I think it's important to be very thorough throughout the entire mesh as you go. With this foundational sculpt, I'll be sculpting eyeballs in the mesh itself, and that's just a temporary measure to get a basic shape for the eyelids to follow. But in the following retopology, that will be cleaned up and we'll add spheres to take the place of the eyeballs. Again, I'm just trying to address all areas of the head before leveling up again, like the neck and also the ears. It's unfortunate that this is so fast, but I have the screencast keys add-on working, and hopefully you can catch the hotkeys that I'm hitting in the bottom left-hand corner of the 3D view. The eyes usually take the most work and most patience to get correct in this foundational sculpt, but don't be afraid to spend a lot of time here. The eyes are crucial for connecting with the viewer when it comes to realism, and just any kind of character in general. The eyes are crucial, so take your time there and be sure to hit it correctly. As I progress through the foundational sculpt, keep in mind that this is just to give me a surface to retopologize later. My goal is not to make every crease perfect or finely detailed, but instead to guide the following retopology trace. The eye area typically looks a lot sloppier in this initial sculpt, but will be clean in the base mesh again. The crease brush is of course great for creases, but also to inflate over the new crease that you've created. Really emphasizes the crease and fills it out to be more correct. So you'll see me doing that a lot, adding a crease with the crease brush and then lightly inflating over that crease to essentially pinch it up. But pinch will do exactly that. It'll pinch it too flat. Inflate keeps the nice bulge on either side of the crease. As a personal preference, I never use, well, maybe not never, but I rarely use image planes when sculpting a face or most organic shapes. I've found that when I did that in the past, my heads and my bodies ended up feeling flat and boxy, even though it looked perfect from the front ortho or it looked perfect from the side. It never felt right in perspective. So you'll see that I don't use image planes here. I would suggest to get in touch with your artistic side and orbit around a lot as if this were clay, and just with practice you'll start to develop an eye for the perspective, because also when finding people's faces, you're never going to find an orthographic view of a face that's I mean, orthographic in itself is a hypothetical view. It's not a real camera angle. So I would suggest using orthographic as little as possible. The fleshy overlap on top of the upper eyelid is also a crucial point, just in general. Anything around the eyes, I know I've mentioned them several times, but it's just because of their importance. Take your time and get the folds and overlap correct. So I'm starting to round third base on the sculpt and adding slightly finer details like a butt chin and a collarbone. So I'm close enough to call this finished, and I'm going to turn the preview setting in the multi-resolution modifier. I'm going to turn that up to 5 because I'm going to start my retopology, and I want to be retopologizing on the highest level. So I'm just going to readjust the scale and position of my head, just I guess to fit how I want it on the grid. And so now I've started the retopology, and right now I'm loading reference. It's always a good idea to have reference up of good topology to guide you along in the retopology process. So yeah, here I've started with a plane. I delete one vert, and this is just a preference thing, but this leaves me 3 verts to now place any way I want to. Also in the settings for retopology is to click the magnet, which is the snap icon in the header of the 3D view, and to turn it to face mode. And that way, whenever you drag any edges or verts or faces along another surface, it will stick. And this is how how it's sticking to the face right now, to the sculpt rather. And the common practice or hotkey workflow for this is either with a vert selected, right click on the right click somewhere, and that will extrude a new vert at the point of your clicking. And also you'll see me just extrude with E, 1 vert at a time. And here I'm starting, I usually always start with the mouth and make sure that the loops around the mouth are correct and even, and then I'll move up the face and then go to the eye socket. It's important to get the loops correct around the mouth and the eye socket, and then secondary importance is connecting the loops. But primarily you want to get those loops around those 2 areas correct first. Also, when I've drawn several verts, I will just connect them, select two, hit F, and then select the whole area that now has 4 verts in relation to each other, and that will fill the faces in. It kind of occurred to me later after I'd started the retopology, but this website, hippiedrome.com, has two great images for referencing good edge flow on the face, and I would suggest that you find those and save them. Some common mesh operations that I use while retopologizing are things like smooth vertex, cut a new edge loop with Control R, and also slide edge loop. These are so handy to have when retopologizing, but when you use them, they don't snap to the surface, even with snapping on. So any area that I use any of those operations, keep in mind that you'll need to select them and then hit G right click, or I guess I have my hotkeys different, so G left click will snap those to the surface and not be hovering above it. From time to time I'll preview the mesh, which now has a mirror modifier added to it, so I only have to retopologize half the face, and periodically I will scale the the middle verts. I will scale that to the center after hitting Shift C, which will put the cursor back at the origin, and then I scale using the cursor. And that will just always keep those verts straight. And also you might want to, as you can see here, I have accidentally hit S, which is scaling all the verts and trying to snap them to the surface, which can be pretty taxing on the CPU. So here it'll leave it frozen for a while. When that happens, right click to get out of it, But anyway, when scaling the center verts to be even across or on the x-axis, you'll also want to turn snapping off for that. I won't be rigging this mesh for this tutorial series, but I am retopologizing this as if it were to be rigged. So I'm not saying that my topology is perfect, but it should work well for a riggable mesh. And don't be shy with the edge loops around the eyes. It's usually better to have more than not enough. So though it looks a little cramped in there, that will be very beneficial for shapes like blinking if this were to be rigged. I'm a pretty big believer in reusing parts, especially complex human body parts, or like screws and hard surface. So I imported an ear from a mesh I did a while back that I use in almost all of my human heads. I also do the same thing for hands and for feet, but there's nothing wrong with reusing geometry you've already created, but it is my geometry. I'm not stealing someone else's ear. But that's what I did. That's why all of a sudden there's an ear there. Something I'm not doing is saving enough. If you've spent any time in CG, you know how heartbreaking it is for your program to crash and you lose hours of work. So I am not doing that right now. Be sure to save often when you're working. Now we'll add the sphere geometry to represent the eyeball. It's important to not have the iris or the center of the sphere, the pole of the sphere, pointing straight ahead in Y. For me, I find that makes my character look like he's cross-eyed. So I will rotate it in the Z-axis slightly towards the outside. And this is, again, an eyeballing thing. You need to match your reference. However you need to rotate or fit that eyeball in. But this is usually this is not a science for me. It's a lot of trial and error and rotating and repositioning until the eye doesn't look googly-eyed or cross-eyed. And it helps to assign an iris color proxy and a dark pupil material to the geometry to help out with the positioning. But once you've committed, then you can start moving your eyelid to match the shape of that sphere. But it helps to just look up either a skull or an anatomical drawing of a skull to see how big the eye socket is, because the eyeball is much bigger than the portion that you actually see out between the lids. For the sake of the subsurface shader that we'll be creating in the future, I make it habit to extrude the inside of the eyelid. That helps to give a more realistic scatter effect in the eyelids. So I'm satisfied with the way the eyeball sits in the head and the way the lids lay on the eyeball now. So I'm just checking over the head as a whole to see any inconsistencies or lumpiness that I can smooth out. And if this was being rigged, again, I would add a full mouth cavity in here. But since this is we're not ever going to see in the character's mouth, I'm just extruding a little bit into the mouth to recreate the backside of the lips, and this will also help in the subsurface effect on the lips, and just to represent that these are two opposing fleshes meeting and sitting on top of each other, resting against each other rather, that it's not just a crease cut into the mesh. As I go over the head to make sure it's the topology is the way I want. Don't be afraid to add more loops. Here I'm adding more definition to the laugh line. Okay, so almost exactly 3 hours later, I have a base mesh that I'm happy with, and this will conclude part 1 of the series. Next, I'll be sculpting the high frequency detail. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching.